But also, I think Reform, as a new party, has been able to handle a lot of issues well, and it's always harder to begin rather than to continue anything, pretty much. A business, a party, and of course, this situation with Rupert Love, with Nigel Farage being called a narcissist, etc., not being able to handle things well, according to some people, is of course. Appealing to those people who are looking into future when Reform will potentially grow and will be a massive machine. So I want to ask you this: how big is the party now? Uh, how structured it is, and how easy to navigate you think it will be in future?
The people who want to put that message forward are predominantly the establishment. And by the establishment, I mean the media class, which is more or less wholly controlled by Labour and the Conservatives. There's not much independent media with the same traction as the mainstream media yet in this country, although it's growing. And certainly we can see on X that people are getting their information from other sources now. But the establishment, particularly the Tory media, want to destroy Farage. They want to destroy any challenge to their hegemony on the right of politics. I mean, I can't even call them a right-wing party now. I think they're actually left-wing. The Tories, yeah. I'd say that, yeah, and it's true. If you look at their record since Tony Blair, I mean, they've governed to the left of him on every issue, without exception. Challenge me on an issue, and I'll prove to you that they govern to the left of Blair. And in fact, Cameron was the one to say, well, I'm the heir to Blair. So, they're a left-wing party as far as I'm concerned. But for the sake of this debate, we'll say that they control right-wing media in this country, and they don't want to let that slip. So the chance to call Farage a narcissist, incapable, incompetent, to call the party these things is exactly what they want. It's not true. Of course it's not true. They feared Farage for 30 years because he was the only guy who could destroy them. In 2019, they had to come begging for him. Boris Johnson had to come begging to ask Nigel to move aside. And Nigel, for the good of the country and for the unity of the country post-Brexit, said yes. And as he said, that was his biggest mistake, trusting the establishment, trusting the Tory party. So that's just simply not true. I mean, if Nigel was as bad as some people want to paint him out, he couldn't succeed. Yes, there's always going to be infighting. Yes, people have differences of opinion. And as a leader, sometimes you have to make very difficult choices about who you're going to side with. And I think so far, Nigel has done a brilliant job of being the guy who's chasing the establishment, hunting the establishment. The difficulty for Nigel now, and for Reform as a party, is that we're now the hunted. We're now the number one party. He is tipped widely to be the next Prime Minister of the UK. So you're suddenly in a totally different sphere, right? You've got the media attacking you all the time. You've got people looking to chase after you. You've got people attacking and tearing down your party, calling you all the names under the sun. Well, actually, that's a sign of success because they've finally woken up that we are the biggest challenge to the establishment. And people who are looking to see whether or not Reform can form a capable government. Well, I'd say this. First of all, I go back to my point about why I was attracted to the party, which is that we've got competent, educated, and by educated, I don't mean they went to Eton. I mean that they understand business and they understand the real world. Educated in the school of hard knocks, that's what we say. They understand the way that the UK works on a business level. That's why I was attracted to the party. To be able to reform the UK, to form a competent government that knows what to do, there are a few elements we've still got to put in place on the legislative side, in terms of the personnel that takes over in the civil service, in terms of how we reshape the civil service. But the actual instincts of a party to lead and run a country are all there. We have all of those people. We have the talent that the Tory party and the Labour Party are completely lacking. Completely. I've worked with parties, politicians, individuals for years, and I have seen a consistent lack of understanding of the real world in both parties. It's not exclusive to the Tory party. And you can see it just from the front bench with the current Labour politicians. I mean, you look at their backgrounds. I think 2 of them have some business experience, and both of it was like running an agency or something. I mean, they don't understand the real world. Like, no one is qualified. The only guy who said he was qualified as a lawyer, apart from Starmer, actually wasn't even a real lawyer. You've got one person calling himself an economist, which he worked in complaints. I mean, in the Bank of England. None of these people have any real world experience to be leading a country.
What do you think about Keir Starmer, though?
Keir Starmer is very intelligent and very dangerous, in my opinion. Very dangerous.
What does that mean?
I am on record as saying that I think that basically what you have with Keir Starmer is a soft communist takeover. I think that Keir uses all of the fundamental characteristics of a socialist leader, of somebody who wants to be a petty dictator. I think that he has gone through his entire career dreaming of this moment where he can actually throw his weight around. There's an old sort of saying that you shouldn't let a lawyer run anything. I know many very good lawyers, so I'm not saying that about everyone. But I think with Starmer, you see that in action. He has this kind of ego that he knows what's best legislatively. He uses the law very, very, very interestingly. He does it in a way that means he can always find a loophole. He can always find a way to justify his own decision. That's the definition for me of somebody who is dangerous, because they are willing to use legal loopholes and ways of acting that are contrary to moral order, purely to hold on to power. And we can see that from the way he tries to terrify his own citizens by throwing them in jail for memes, by the way that he is more than happy to send billions in foreign aid, but won't give pensioners at home a few million to get through the winter. The way that he lies about what he's doing with the borders, and he's claiming that he's sending people back and crushing the gangs and all this kind of stuff. It's not true. Our immigration numbers have continued to go up under his watch. I mean, the Tories were basically managed decline. I would say Keir Starmer is accelerated decline. He is a whole nother kettle of dangerous. And one other thing I'd say about him, and I think it was Peter Hitchens and a few others who initially pointed this out, much to their credit, although there were others who talked about it. When Keir Starmer was a student, he was going to USSR communist training camps in Central Europe and hanging out with some of the most senior ranking socialist agitators at the time who were grooming students for the communist regime. And that's his background, and he's never disavowed it. He has never said that was a bad thing to do. So as far as I'm concerned, that's where his views still lie.
And yet, from what I've seen on his character, I mean, you probably would guess that I'm not a big supporter of Keir Starmer, but from what I've seen with my ability to analyze, he's always able to adjust his character to a certain extent, especially during the external affair, during the negotiations with Trump, when we could see him hating Trump for the whole of his career, and now having to deal with Trump and having to say he's actually a good guy because the UK needs the US. Yeah. The same as every country needs the US.
He's a typical politician. He's two-faced, and he's very good at being two-faced. He'll greet his enemy with a smile, right? Which is what every politician has to do. But the thing with Starmer is that even though he had a good showing with Trump on paper, Trump didn't do to him what he's done to other world leaders, and he came away with saving some face. I mean, he brought a letter from the king, which I think was a genius masterstroke, because that was a way to get the more patriotic side of the country on side, to get Trump on side, because Trump loves the British royalty. But he was still going down in the opinion polls at home while he did it. People just don't buy Keir Starmer. They don't buy. I mean, this is the guy who is sold off our national security in the Chagos Islands and US national security, ostensibly to China, because Mauritius has many problems in its dealings with China. this is a guy who is prepared to give territorial, economic, geopolitical ground up to a communist regime in the CCP.
So what is he doing that for?
Why do all communists cooperate? Right? Because they're working together. Because I'm not accusing Keir Starmer of cooperating with a foreign country, by the way. I'm saying that he's simply being true to his ideology, which is socialism. Socialists will always work together. This is how they win, right? They put their differences to one side until they've won. Starmer is an odd mix of communism and globalism, right? This is a modern phenomenon. You know, the traditional hard left, the real socialists, the original Marxists, if you like, the Galloways of this world, and people who were of the old left in this country, they're actually quite nationalistic. They're actually quite pro-Brexit. They're pro-borders. They're pro-internal labour. They would totally disagree with what Starmer's doing now, because what Starmer's doing is the Fabian way of doing things. The Fabian society believed that you should slowly grab power in small increments by doing things that weren't revolutionary. And that's exactly what Starmer's doing. He's accelerating it a little bit now because he can, because he's in power. But the Fabians don't believe in bloody revolutions. They don't believe in the workers rising up and taking over. They believe in incremental change and progress over time, which is so small that you almost don't notice it. And Tony Blair did this brilliantly. Tony Blair took apart our constitution, reinvented it, and put in his own ideas. He created the Supreme Court. We never had a Supreme Court in this country. A Supreme Court that's capable of overturning the seal of the king on a parliamentary bill, or on, as we saw, the proroguing of Parliament after Brexit. And that was the first massive coup, if you like. It was the first time the Fabians stepped out of their shell and said, this is what we're all about. And now Starmer's doing the second wave of this. It's a continuation. I would go so far as to say there hasn't been a change of government since 1997 in this country, because I think the Tories are just as complicit. They didn't undo one iota of what Tony Blair did. They increased net migration. They increased net zero commitments. They didn't undo any of his legislation. They upheld the Supreme Court. They did so many things that are completely anti-Tory, anti-conservative. They essentially just continued government, and now Starmer's once again accelerating.
And there, when you criticize Keir Starmer for being willing to slowly grab power, I think it would make sense to kind of draw a parallel with Trump, as he's often being loved by right-wing people. He's very populist in the opinion of many people. And the way he's been conducting his, especially the previous time he's been in government, the way he's exited the government was very worth condemnation, in my opinion. The January 6th attacks. What do you think about those? Does that not demonstrate his willingness to hold on to power for as long as he can?
Well, first of all, I don't want to go too deeply into American politics because it probably deserves another hour of our time. But January the 6th for me was nothing to do with Trump. I don't think that Trump incited anyone to do anything. If you read what he actually wrote...
He just didn't stop them. That's the thing.
Yeah, but he didn't know it was happening. So how can you stop something you don't know is happening? He literally said, make sure there's no violence. Make sure that, we rise up in peaceful protest. He said all of that. The media distorts people's stuff, people's tweets, people's words, people's actions in real time. This is something we're coping with. This isn't just a left-wing thing. It's right and left. I look at the entire media class as completely dishonest. I don't know of many, if any, newspapers that, or certainly not TV, that don't put immediate spin on a story. It's crazy the level of misinformation around January the 6th. Yeah, there were some bad actors in that crowd. But if you look into who's lying dead now, that was a protester that got shot. that wasn't, they didn't start by coming in and shooting security or doing anything stupid. It turned into a stampede because somebody got shot by a guard, right? And then things went out of control. But if you look at all the video footage, there was hardly any violence. There was isolated incidents of violence, and those people are in jail or dead, depending on what happened in each situation. There wasn't like some kind of crazy stampede. I mean, you're allowed to walk into the Capitol building if security lets you, and security were letting them in. So you have to say, well, who was complicit? Was it Trump who was saying, protest, but make sure you do it peacefully? Or was it the Democrats who were in charge of the building and were allowing security to just usher people in and expect nothing to happen? I mean, if you have a controlled protest in London, you're not allowed past a certain line. You wouldn't be allowed and ushered into the grounds of Westminster. Security would stop you. You wouldn't be allowed in. So why were they allowed into the building in the first place? There's so many questions around January 6th. So I wouldn't blame Trump for that. Trump did say that the system was rigged and the election was stolen, right? And that's a whole nother debate. I don't know if the election was stolen. I don't think you can prove that right now. Maybe the evidence is out there. But I think actually Trump was almost the opposite in some ways of the Starmer-Blair thing, because I don't think Trump first time around knew how government worked. And he said this since. I mean, I don't think he realised how many people were there willing to backstab him, were willing to undermine him, to make sure that things didn't happen and use the legislature against him. If anything, Trump is an anomaly. I think the Democrats, if you look at the Democrats are very similar to what both the Tories and Labour do here, which is that they consolidate power at any cost. And they have the same 3 or 4 people advising, pulling the strings behind the scenes all the time. They're very good at continuity. Trump is not great at continuity. Trump is liable to be divisive, to have infighting, all these kind of things. And he is big enough to ride over this and create a stable kind of cabinet on top of that. But if you look at the Democrats, I would parallel them with what both the Tories and Labour have done for the last 20 years. I would also say, I would go further than that. I'd say that Tony Blair, Alistair Campbell, and Dick Cheney were basically best mates, right? That's what happened. That's why we went to war in Iraq. Okay? They were all working together. I would even go further. I'd say that Biden learned from Blair. I would say that Obama taught Cameron. There's an incredible incestuous feel to the way that politics worked in the early 2000s, right? So from about 1997 until now, this is what I mean when I say there hasn't, not just a change of government in the UK, but in some ways in the whole Western hegemony, apart from Trump disrupting things, and now Nigel over here, there haven't really been any challenges to the establishment. They've all been best mates. They've all co-opted each other's policies and worked on the same foreign wars and tried to gain the same globalist brownie points. And this is the first time we've seen a challenge to the establishment. And you might not like it.